So, I was having an existential crisis. No, not the one referred to in the title of the video, this was a completely different one. I wasn't getting enough hours at my then primary job, the nearby retail place wasn't hiring me for some reason, and while I have a good amount of savings, the negative income wasn't doing my mental state any favors. Weighing my options, moving could give me more work opportunities, but would be time-consuming and expensive. I also didn't want to go too far from my family, which meant staying in California where, it's kind of expensive. I considered going to college, garnering an immense amount of debt for, some reason. I'd get a piece of paper that might open up some doors, but still, even if I did, there was the matter of what I might study. After some consideration, I realized that learning Japanese made the most sense, as not only could it give opportunities through the possibility of translation or working in Japan somehow, it could also help me personally with my hobbies and YouTube. The language able to allow me to check out works of fiction or do research locked off to a more monolingual me. Now, going into college for it, frankly, seemed pretty ridiculous. I haven't been to any kind of school in like 9 years, and there was no sense in forcing myself to enter that environment if I could learn anything I was interested in on my own with my diligence, interest, and the countless tools of the internet. Going for a degree in translation or something would make sense, but if I ever do that, it'd be better for my wallet to have learned Japanese already. Save me a few years and all. So I set out to become bilingual in hopes of opening doors to quell my financial anxiety, only to get hired by that retail place, getting a full-time position in a few months, and achieving relatively stable finances. I decided to keep on with the Japanese though, of course. Well, being the completionist that I am, I decided I had to finish English first and started working towards learning every word in the dictionary. No, I didn't actually do that. But what I am doing is offering a channel update in the form of a video explaining my still ongoing efforts to learn Japanese, sharing some of the pitfalls I fell into before explaining what it means for the future of the channel. And hey, maybe it might motivate someone to learn Japanese. With machine translation already being an issue that looks like it's only going to get worse, not better, I honestly can't be more glad that I'm learning, even if the road is a harsh one. I've been learning a lot, and not even just in language, but in relearning how to learn, since it's been so long since I really picked up any new skills, which would have been in those formative years of my channel. What I don't want to do is offer some kind of big guide for learning Japanese. At best, I can give a little direction. There's also a lot of resources already out there, and while one could say which are better than others and in what ways, the truth is that the most important thing is just to stick with it for a while. Even if you're using a flawed or bad tool, the continued long-term exposure in the language will help you and make it easier to try something new later down the line. Reddit user Summer9, when discussing his journey, had focused primarily on listening and speaking for about 550 hours worth across 4 years after university, but when he did get to reading, he had a leg up on account of knowing so many words already through passive knowledge. Is it the best or most ideal way? Well, that's one thing I want to stress. I found a number of guides on how to get into learning Japanese, and all of them are good in that they can offer tools or perspectives with which to bolster your own learning journey, but all of them are bad in that blindly following them isn't necessarily going to be the best for you. Case in point, I started with the Moe Way, a relatively popular strategy to the immersion method of Japanese learning, which focuses on learning the language through reading, watching, and listening to a bunch of Japanese media made for a Japanese audience in that native language. I jumped right into the 30-day Japanese guide, which has you learning basic hiragana and katakana alphabets from day 1, watching and listening to anime with Japanese subtitles on day 2, grammar from Kiradali day 3, Anki day 4, reading the Japanese subtitles from day 6, and so on. The kana are pretty self-explanatory and frankly not that difficult to learn, relatively speaking, unless you actually try to learn all of them in one day. Even if you don't get the full grasp of hiragana or katakana right away, you'll be reading them a lot, and that should be more than enough to practice. I found them all quite liberally in Animal Crossing, Idle Precure, and One Piece on top of the regular kanji. It took me months to get a firm separation of sa and chi as I read them, and I don't run into nu often enough to easily recall it on the fly quite yet, but I will reach that point someday. Day 2 is also pretty easy, all things considered. Just watch anime without English subs. Honestly, even if you aren't learning the language, there's stuff you can watch and still get the gist of, but the goal with listening is to turn the speech of another language into something your brain can actually parse. In effect, so that instead of hearing gibberish, you can actually at least make out comprehensible sounds, which can eventually become comprehending the language. I was able to tolerate not knowing what was being said well enough, and in part I think my listening was helped along by my attempt to learn back in 2016. While my study through Rosetta Stone, Anki, and Genki only got me through like 14 chapters of Yatsubato before I put down the language to focus on YouTube, I do think what I learned helped me to better parse the sounds I would hear from the thousands of episodes of anime I watched between then and 2024 when I started learning Japanese again. My actual grasp of the language decreased, but my listening input wasn't actually zero, which is to say, listening to a lot of Japanese I couldn't comprehend the total meaning of wasn't really helpful to me, because I had already been doing it for so long, and that's what the moe seems to put a lot of focus on. With English subtitles and little actual focus, yes, but from November 2024 to February 2025, I found my progress pretty lacking despite listening to a good 100 episodes of Yu podcast, and like all of Tomo's Let's Talk Japanese, on top of some Akuma-kun, a bunch of Yanamon, and whatever else I was watching with English subs at the time. I work a retail job that allows me to just pop on earbuds and listen whenever, so that can give me like 6 to 7 hours a day of listening, which is great. In stuff like Yu podcast, I was occasionally hearing words I was running into in Anki or just knew. Oh, he's talking about Monster Hunter. I can tell, because he said Monster Hunter. But I wasn't studying the grammar or vocab enough, and as a result the audio I was using wasn't becoming comprehensible. Garamon has relatively simple language, but was still a bad choice to start with because it doesn't even have Japanese subs. When I did try to focus on comprehending what was said, I ended up kind of losing my mind. Hidebrandes? 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 Fuck it. This show isn't subbed, but the first dozen or so episodes are. I'll just... Oh, it's the surname. It's not in Japanese. It's not a Japanese word or name. Oh. If you're mostly a reader or haven't spent years watching anime, and especially if you don't have a space to listen to lots of Japanese audio like I can at work, then spending a lot of time listening can be good, but clearly it wasn't for me. At least, not like this. I was studying grammar, mind. Moe recommends Kiradali. While I found her helpful in many ways, especially outside of grammar, I've since come to understand that she has a tendency to oversimplify, and I haven't actually seen a video of hers in a while, but I did get enough out of it to go straight into native material, which is what matters, and I have other resources like Tofugu or Yokubi as needed, so I feel like I'm in an okay spot. While I could have stood to spend a bit more time on grammar, that really wasn't the issue at hand, nor was the main point of my frustration the listening. While I still have so much more to gain in both, my biggest point of contention with the learning has been one of the most useful tools that's also the most tedious and annoying if handled improperly. Ah yes, Anki. Functionally a flashcard program, its primary use is to help when it comes to kanji by repeatedly giving you words you intend to slowly memorize over long periods of time, showing them to you more or less based on how good you are at memorizing them. Moe, and most in general, will recommend the Kaishi 1.5k deck, which is a very well made deck with 1500 of the most common words you might run into. Alongside Kaishi, you'll also want to be mining, which is the process of making your own cards from material you're going through. This is fine on its own, but by using Anki improperly, I mean spending so much time making and studying your cards that you don't have time to actually engage with anything in Japanese. Too many cards? You're fucked. Not yet disciplined enough to do it every day? You're fucked. Spending more than a few seconds per card, bashing your head in trying to remember because it seems familiar even though you'd be better served just failing the card and moving on? You're fucked. I either did not heed these, or didn't know any better. A computer problem in January deleted my deck progress and necessitated starting over. Then in February, after overdoing it with Anki, I deleted my deck and started fresh once again. In June, I was once again burning myself out, but took some advice from users on the English-Japanese language exchange Discord and put my new cards on hold for a while until my reviews reached a more manageable point, which they finally have a month later. Trust me, don't get eager. Don't do more than 10 new cards a day. Turn them off if you're spending more than 20 to 30 minutes a day on Anki, if that, and spend the extra time you would be doing Anki on actually reading or watching something in Japanese instead. It took me some time to reconcile with Anki, but while trying to find the answers, I ended up watching some of Kiradali's non-grammar videos, which led me to, well, this one, in which Kiradali discusses why so many people fail to learn Japanese, presenting an argument that lots of people with English as a second language on the internet get good with it because they use it every day. And because by using the English side of the internet, they gain a good grasp because they have to have the space in their lives where they use it on the regular.
We should be ring-fencing areas of our life that are dedicated to Japanese. So it might be games, it might be anime, it might be novels, it might be all of those things. But whatever you've ring-fenced, that is a Japanese-only area.
My failure to make sure my listening was comprehensible was one thing, my inability to properly use Anki was another, but my insistence on continuing on with the rest of my usual backlog consumption and video making, all full of works originally in Japanese that I had been watching or reading with English subs or translation on top of my new goal in studying Japanese, well, it wasn't bearing the fruit I was hoping it was going to. I didn't want to quit, of course. I don't like quitting. I don't like setting goals for myself and then failing to meet them. Did you know when I got into anime in 2012, I went, "Whoa, this is a cool recommendation chart. I'm going to watch literally everything on it." I watched the first row and, well, I'm doing okay, I guess. I already quit Japanese before and I really wish I hadn't. I just wish I'd had better advice and a bit more willpower to press through. But I was destined to fail for the same reason I wasn't meeting my expectations and hopes now, because I wasn't creating good enough boundaries to push myself into needing the language. I had added Japanese to my schedule, but what I needed to do was to pick something I was doing already and limit myself to doing it in Japanese instead. What I had to do became pretty clear, but not easy. If my goal is to engage with any media that comes from Japan in its native language, then the fastest way to meet that goal is to simply do so. But in order to do that, I would have to take all my plans for YouTube and throw them out? I did a lot of research already, but I've been meaning to make a video on Persona 1 and 2 for a while, since I've been finding them really interesting. I finished one of the two routes of Persona 1 and the first game of Persona 2, Innocent Sin, leaving Snow Queen Quest and Eternal Punishment. But if I were to play them in Japanese, how long would it take? By the time I finished, would I still have any will at all to do the video? Would I even understand them well enough? YouTube rewards having a good turnover time on videos, and while frankly I haven't been the best about that in the first place, learning Japanese certainly wouldn't give me an advantage there. I could simply decide to go through things I was planning to make a video on in English, but I go into things in hopes of making a video like always, already. Not explicitly, but rather I always have it on the mind if I'll get something out of what I'm watching or playing, or whatever that might be video worthy, and the answer is usually no. Even putting aside the time needed for either, learning Japanese would be a big help for my channel in opening avenues for research or Japanese-only media I could go through, so it makes sense to focus on it, but the time needed away from my channel would be a downer since I just had a hiatus in 2022 and I don't want to let even more people down, or starve my fans who've stuck with me for so long. At this point, in the middle of the morning before a closing shift, I was sitting by myself in the middle of the titular existential crisis, wondering if I should leave YouTube or not. I reached out to some of my friends and Vindy answered the call, telling me what I needed to hear. If setting boundaries was what I needed to do, and YouTube was a suitable motivation to get me to learn Japanese and that it could make my videos better, then I should do it. My fans might be disappointed, but with an end result being better videos, surely they couldn't be too mad. And he also noted that time and experience leads to better writing ability, thus I would be coming back stronger whenever I did. I reached this impasse because I've been working on YouTube for so long that the noisy brainworms telling me to keep making content and always be working on new things were getting in my way when it came to making that content better. And I had to shut it out if it means doing what's better for me and my channel in the longer run, but more on that later. For now, settled on my choice, I was finally able to set the fences when it came to my media to facilitate learning Japanese. The first one was the most obvious. If taking things that are important to you and engaging with them in Japanese is a good motivator, then it only made sense to stop reading One Piece weekly unless I could get through the chapters in Japanese. Like, Akuma-kun and Yanomon are fine, I like the latter enough and I'm interested in the former, but while they are untranslated, I could most likely live my life without them just fine. One Piece I've been reading weekly since April 2006. It's my favorite story and one I've gotten so much out of. If I can't read it except in Japanese, then I'm fucking learning Japanese. I made similar changes across the board. My first major rule was that I couldn't start anything new unless it was in Japanese. This allowed me to continue a number of things I was going through in English until their conclusion as I saw fit, but eventually that well would run dry and I'd be forced to use Japanese if I wanted to read manga or watch anime again. It actually ran dry quicker than I thought, as my desire to go through things in Japanese led to me putting a bunch of stuff on hold that I was only so interested in. Manga, mostly Jump and Jump Plus stuff, is still my bigger time investment as far as English translated stuff goes, but a series will end every so often, and I already paused anything that I was waiting on translation for or otherwise wasn't getting regular updates. I also decided that anything I go through with friends I'd stick to in English for the time being, like Monster Hunter Wilds, Elden Ring Night Rain, or Doremi. One of my other big changes was Animal Crossing, which I've been going through because I wanted to play all the games. Well, actually I had the crazy idea to play all the franchises that Super Smash Bros. Has characters in. Hold on. Let's start from the beginning. In 2019, I was thinking about anime that I've seen and how a lot of the more highly scored shows from back when I first got into anime no longer really reflected my taste. So I decided to do a big anime favorites rewatch that I mostly finished with. Just kidding, I have to see all of them in Japanese now without English subtitles. But I also decided to do the same thing with manga, video games, and eventually other mediums. With video games, I happened upon another idea. Aside from the fact that so many of my favorite games were Nintendo ones, I did really like Smash and considered going back to each entry. But what if I didn't just replay Smash, but played each entry after having engaged with each of the franchises represented in its cast? For example, replaying the original Smash Bros., but only after having played Mario, Donkey Kong, Pokemon, Star Fox, Metroid, Yoshi, Kirby, Zelda, F-Zero, and Mother in their entirety. Thus, I could engage with Smash and its characters knowing them from their source material and how they're represented, rather than just, oh hey, it's that guy from Smash. Thinking ahead, I realized the biggest hurdle might not be Mario or whatever other big franchises like Final Fantasy or Shin Megami Tensei I had, but Animal Crossing. Playing the individual entries wasn't as much of an issue in itself, but rather it was about finding a way to play them and still feel like I was engaging with the game. To go into each one, clear the debt, and move on didn't seem right to me, so I decided to play each of them for a year before moving on to the next one. Start on the 2nd of January, play through New Year's Day, then pick up the next one on the following day. I started with Animal Crossing in 2023, Wild World in 2024, and City Folk was my game for this year. After changing my learning method, I started a new file in February for the Japanese version, Machi Iko yo Dobutsu no Mori, and proceeded to take like 4 hours across 3 days to finish Tanukichi-san's errands, and was scared away from the game for like a month before returning to it for another 3, and honestly reaching a point where I could do my daily tasks and read letters at a comfortable pace, before a OneDrive issue deleted most of my save data due to my ineptness and negligence. I should have just put a notepad document called Portable in my root folder. It would have saved them. They didn't have to die because of me. They were just living their daily lives, and now they're gone. My soul will receive no salvation in the end. The bulk of my learning, however, was neither of these. As much as I like reading One Piece, the greatest source of my weekly excitement has been motherfucking idle Precure. The first 2 episodes were super funny, and this is also the first series to start after I finished watching all the preceding shows. So starting from episode 1 again, I worked my way through in the process of catching up. It was rough. Episode 1 took me like a few days, and I had some other stuff going on, so I didn't catch up until like episode 6 or 7. This was also the primary show I used for listening. While podcasts didn't not help me, the best kind of input is comprehensible, and the trimmed down audio of episodes I already watched, practically line by line, is about as comprehensible as you can get for a beginner. I've probably heard the first episode like 150 times by now, and the bit with the sumo wrestler somehow fitting into Pururun's speech is still funny. It might not be the most efficient, with the amount of music terms that will only come up so often in other things, or just made up things like Bigu Kirakira Ribbon, and half of Pururun's dialogue being Puri Puri Puri. But hey, them's the breaks. The language you get from a given thing is nice, but having something you like to engage with is way more important. And even still, spending extra time with something I know I would have liked normally has definitely elevated my feelings. When Pururun is prepared to sacrifice her months of memories to help her new friends, I no doubt felt more strongly because of the months I'd been spending with these characters alongside her. The length of the show further acting as a metric for my own growth in the language, as I can watch a new episode in a fraction of the time it took me to get through the first one, and will no doubt be at an even better point with it by the time it ends. A solid show made more special for what I've been getting out of it and using it to learn a new language. I'll take it. So, my learning has been going. I kind of wish that my favorite thing I've been going through wasn't idle Precure, because the weekly wait is not exactly conducive to any study, if they even come out with subs on day 1. If I had all the episodes, I probably would have finished it by now, which is more than I can say for a lot of what else I've been going through. The fact that it's just more difficult to go through stuff in Japanese also has kept me moving on in hopes of finding something I'm just as into as Precure. I read Momotaro, since it's referenced so much in everything, and it shares a children's book. I tried to keep up with the new Super Sentai as well, but since every episode looked like it was going to introduce so much new vocab and it was good, but not good enough for the effort I would need to watch every episode weekly on top of everything else, so I put it on hold. I started rewatching One Piece back in 2023 when I was on a huge kick after rereading Wano, I didn't make it that far, but I did give watching it in Japanese a shot and will continue. While it did come a bit easier than the recent chapters, I've also gone through it so much that it didn't feel very helpful. Like, I would hear a line, half understand it, but still know what was being said because I've owned the volumes in English for closer to 20 years at this point now, and read the shit out of them, thus I would literally just remember what was said in English. Shirokuma Cafe is commonly recommended as a starting anime in Japanese, and I did think it was funny from the first episode, but I wasn't chomping at the bit to watch more. Randomly, I was checking out a comic shop and found, of all fucking things, the first volume of an Orihime sequel manga focused on Best Girl? It didn't ring up and the dude was like, "You want it for $5?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I've been reading books before bed and was interested in looking at something physical in Japanese at some point. So I started the original manga and it's fine. It's Orihime, but the art isn't great, so the girls aren't as cute, so I don't know. I want to come back to all this stuff I didn't finish eventually. I don't need to get hung up on my completionism now when it'll be easier later on. I also watched the Animal Crossing movie, which I tried out as a tactic I've been considering called priming. See, let's say there's a piece of media you're interested in that you want to go through, but it's pretty difficult, either because of the language used or its medium. An anime with Japanese subtitles is relatively easier, the words you hear are all dialogue, and there are means like MPV's copy stuff or browser extensions that can allow you to pull words directly from the subfile, meaning you don't need to rely on text or voice alone as they complement each other. The voice tells you how the kanji is read, and the text tells you directly what's being said without risk of trying to peg it down by ear. But what if you're watching something that maybe doesn't have subtitles, and you can't pause it? Or you're trying to do something else like dodge attacks and the boss is yapping and you'd struggle enough to understand it in just a normal context? So to deal with that, I've considered priming myself by checking out works that might have similar language or vocab to your target to give you an edge. After struggling with Animal Crossing, I thought it made sense to try some stuff with similar vibes, and well, the movie had subs. And it's a pretty fun movie that adapts a lot of ideas and elements from the games into a surprisingly solid narrative. But it's just one movie, so going from beginning to end didn't give me that sense of progress. The trick is to find something you're really interested in and willing to push through the barrier that is lack of understanding for, but while interest and engagement is ideal, having a lot to sink your teeth into is great, because the more time you spend with it, the more you can see your progress. There's a short article on Tofuku that highlights this, but the first page of a given work is going to be the most difficult, as it will be introducing you to a bunch of the most common words and terms you'll be running into, and by jumping around a lot and finding one thing that's coming out too slowly for me to really dive into, I've kind of hindered myself in the short term, I think. If I were to start from zero right now, I'd learn the kana, read Yokubi, and do about 100 words in Anki from Kaishi across 10 days before finding something I was interested in, ideally something with text and audio like a subtitled anime or visual novel that's of a decent length, and dig the fuck into it. Reading a lot and mining words is commonly said to be a good way to learn, but having audio for listening practice is nice, especially if you want to be able to watch anime without subtitles or take part in conversation in something like the Learning Exchange Discord or VR chat. As for Anki, I would probably delete the sentence in front of the Kaishi card to make my cards look the same on the front regardless of what deck it's from, and make sure I was only getting 10 cards per day collectively from Kaishi in my mining deck. When adding a new card, you can search to see if it's already in Kaishi first and reposition it to number 0 instead of mining it. Suspend it when you come across it later, or just have a duplicate card, I guess, not that big a deal. For the mining itself, at first I just added every word I ran into, which I think is a good move for something you're going to be studying closely, like the early episodes of Idol Precure that I've listened to so much, but after a point I found a lot of words that I've only bumped into once in a given episode. To keep my Anki deck from getting bloated with words I'm not actually seeing that much, I've been doing a 3-strike rule. If I have to look up a word and it's not already in my deck, I'll add it to a notepad list I have. If I look it up and it's already there, I'll add another X to it. And if there are already 2 X's, then it's time to add it to my Anki deck. In the far future, this will keep me from adding words because I might be able to intuit them from context, and thus not have to look them up. But in the short term, I've filtered over 1,300 words, a third of a year's worth of new Anki cards that I've only just started running into, keeping my backlog of new cards a bit more manageable and ensuring that they're words I'll really need. And eventually all those words will be added as I read more and more and keep going. Because I don't intend to stop, given the breadth of my backlog and continued interest in all sorts of games, anime, and manga. Although I lost my Animal Crossing save, after starting over just a few months before as it was, one thing trying to learn Japanese has drilled into me is that there's no such thing as starting from zero. That hypothetical was just that, but I did try to learn in 2016, retried in 2024, revised my methods heavily in February, and after I'm done with this video, I'll be entering a new stage in my learning. I don't plan on giving up, but even that time I tried to learn back in 2016 helped me when I restarted over 8.5 years later. Even if I don't play Animal Crossing again until next year, what I did engage with will help me when I do come back to it. I had a pretty bad experience on Italki when I wanted to try conversation, but when I try again, everything I've been doing since will help me. Those hours of podcasts might not have been the most efficient, but they weren't nothing either. "It's a marathon, not a race," is a quote I've heard time and time again, and it's one I need to remember. I want it to be a race, because I want to be able to engage with anime and manga at the speed I can in English, just in Japanese for the sake of my backlog and my YouTube channel, and the only way I can do it is by going through as much as I can in Japanese, slowly but surely. What this means for my channel is that until I can be comfortable enough in my grasp on language to continue with content as I have been, achieving enough understanding to confidently talk about it as I'd like, I have to put the channel on hiatus. Trying to do both right now will only hinder both, and by choosing one of them, it will help me in the other. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I do legitimately think it will be better for me and my channel in the long run. It's not the only self-improvement I've been doing either. I'm exercising. Light exercise, but more than I've ever done before. I've always been skinny, so now I'm eating a bit more and a bit better. I started learning touch typing too after being a hunt and pecker for the better part of 25 years. Aside from Japanese, I also want to read more books and become better acquainted with the critical theory I might draw from distantly despite having barely scratched the surface of the text that get boiled down, warped, and corrupted for annoying internet discourse. YouTube has been a big part of my life for 9 years as of this month, and taking another break isn't going to change that. I love art, and I love talking about it. I'm a weirdo, and I legitimately think my skills and perspectives can offer something to the platform that can't really be gotten elsewhere. And if what I have done doesn't show that, then what I have in mind will hopefully prove it. But unlike 2022, I won't be vanishing. I've been streaming weekly since late 2023. Saturdays I tend to stream mystery games, having just finished Master Detective Archive's Raincode with plans to go back to Ace Attorney and start 100 Line this year. In the middle of the week I've been doing a series where I play through FromSoft games, aiming to both understand the lore and get swole as I do 10 push-ups every time I die. When this goes up, I should be in the process of starting Shadow Tower Abyss, which will be the last game directly derived from Kingsfield before I get to Demon's Souls, and I certainly hope it matches the crushing, bleak atmosphere of the first one. By the time I get through Elden Ring, I'm going to be Toguro huge, or my arms will fall off. So far, I've done the most push-ups in the aptly named Passage of Death in Kingsfield 3, where I fell 9 times. The FromSoft streams have a lot of downtime, so if you just want to chat or ask me questions, try to make it. I also have a Patreon server, which I will be opening to all patrons, even at the $1 tier, and later this year I'll be switching to monthly payment instead of per video for more consistency. Maybe sooner, maybe later, I'll be resuming a reformed segment I used to do called the Backlog Builder, now tentatively called The Wheel. More details will come to patrons, but every $1 you give a month will become points to spend on applicable recommendations to go through a weighted wheel, which I then spin to get a monthly pick I need to read, watch, or play, and make a video on. It'll probably be short, and on God knows what I find most interesting to talk about, be it a thematic reading, character analysis, review, I don't know, we'll see what we get. There will be a lot of restrictions, especially with Japanese stuff at first, until I feel more comfortable, so I wouldn't recommend patroning for the sake of the wheel. Patron because you want to offer me support when it comes to making content, and get wheel picks and patron exclusive videos as a bonus. For free, though it's on break right now, I've been doing In the Den with Hotboy Spicy and some guests like Shabes, Manji, and Vindy, where we go through some media and talk about it. Bleach, The Bear, Code Geass, Lives of P, more. There is a lot of things to not look forward to. Things are rough right now. I don't know what to say about that, but I'm trying to look forward because it's all I can do. Find the goal that excites you the most, and if you can't work towards it, then work towards reaching a position where you can. One step at a time. Any missteps you make are still just steps.